over the recent years, Russia has done a lot to increase military capabilities in the Arctic. 2/3 of the Russian Navy are in the Northern Fleet. Thousands of additional troops have been permanently based in the Arctic, equipped with hardware and military equipment designed to fight in the Arctic. In recent years, more than a dozen airfields and ports, maritime bases have been modernized and built in the Arctic. And you mentioned NATO, but NATO is feeble when it comes to the Arctic. In the 18,000-word-long declaration at the last NATO summit, you won't even find the word Arctic mentioned. So who's Russia preparing to fight in the Arctic? Because it doesn't seem to me that anyone is going to do so. Thank you.
Thank you. One by one. First, when it comes to Russian military fleet, the Navy, being in the north, it has always been the case. Because it's part of Russia, and whether you want it or not, it's the biggest coastline that we have that needs to be certainly protected. Secondly, since the 90s, and maybe a little bit earlier, this area from the point of view of Coast Guard and military presence was almost ignored by us. So what we do there is not exactly increasing our presence, but rather modernizing and facilities and bringing them to the level of being operational. We also do a lot of things that usually are ignored by Heritage Foundation, and that is we clean up these areas, because there was so much of radioactive vestiges and other stuff that had been left by years in years of less than responsible way of using these territories. Secondly, the biggest Russian fleet is our northern fleet. And it certainly has to have a way to go in either direction, to the west and to the east, if that is required by strategic interest of our country. That means, among other things, that they needs to be able to go along the coastline. It needs to have service bases, needs to have search and rescue facilities. By the way, when we are talking about the northern sea route, there is not a single country that has invested a single ruble in search and rescue operations there, but so many countries who want to go there in transit. It's only us who are there. And that is something that is done by the units that are being deployed there that are, by and large, are dual use. They are not only to protect the Coast Guard of Russia, but also to ensure capability for search and rescue that is dual use. And last point on this issue, we have to look into the future. And if the climate change is so strong as it is predicted by the scientists, and so fast as it is already happening, we might see within a generation or two, many other countries using this space for Navy operation. Even today, United States insisting, and I'm referring to public statements of your military people, they using it for submarine operations, overflights, and we know it. So, but it's normal operation. We do not see this region as being militarized by Russia. We are making sure that we are able to protect our very, very long border and this space that is so important to us. When it comes to NATO, it's true that a paragraph on Arctic didn't make it to the statement of the recent meeting of NATO. But new exercises by NATO in Norway are going to take place irrespective of whether there is a paragraph in the joint statement or not. And the Norwegian government, irrespective of its original policy not to allow foreign bases on the territory, decided that now they want to have up to 700 or 800 American forces deployed there on the so-called rotational basis. But rotation, permanent rotation is, for any practical reasons, is the same as permanent basing, sometimes even worse. But at the same time, we also hear about other countries, even those who do not belong to the Arctic area, but belong to NATO, are thinking about deploying there. So we see it happening. It's close to us. Norway has a border with next to Murmansk, and by the way, in this particular region, and there's also some kind of very interesting exception to the rule. The trans-border contacts between people are still going on. I just was in Murmansk, and I was pleasantly surprised how much of interaction between normal people are going on, irrespective of all these NATO movements or Russian fleet being modernized. They continue to work together. They continue to have schools that teach Russian in Norway in Russia. They have school-to-school contacts. They even go to shop to each other. They have sporting events. And when you speak to people who normally live in Murmansk area, they speak about their neighbors in Norway in a very benign way, quite normal, and that's something that I hope will prevail in Arctic as a whole.